Okay, welcome again to another episode of A Solution. In this solution, we're going to look at the 2018 Biology CAPE Paper 2, Question 6. And so I am Mr. Thomas here representing for Buckle Down Tutoring Services, and we want you to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. You can leave a comment asking us to do a solution for a particular question for a given science subject. So we're going to get right into the question. I hope you have the paper and you can work the paper while we're doing it, jotting down the important points. We're going to be looking at a technique of how we can answer questions and ensure that we're answering the questions to obtain the full marks in our exam. All right, so the question says, and just bear with me if I switch my dialogue and speak a little patois. I'm Jamaican, so I have to, relate to my students here in my country, right? And so a chronic disease which are increasing, right? Diseases, sorry, are increasing in both incidence and prevalence are precipitated by lifestyle choices and are having a marked effect on mortality in the Caribbean. While we have that beautiful sea and the sun that everybody craves, we are affected by chronic illness, diseases. It says, explain this phenomenon, referring to a chronic disease as an example. But before we get into it and speaking specifically about a chronic disease, we want to deduce, we want to dive in, we want to dissect the question. So what exactly is a chronic disease? As you can read with me, it says a chronic disease is any long-term medical condition that persists over time, right? And some of the characteristics of a chronic disease is that it persists, it has persistent symptoms. So you basically facing with those symptoms. You may have slow progression over time. And so you might not get ill right away in terms of bedridden, but over time that may happen if you're not doing things to combat this disease. Limited or no cure. And so sometimes persons have to live with the disease for their entire life and try to make modifications. It requires, because of that fact, it requires ongoing management and treatment. It can impact the quality of life and, of course, the individual's daily functioning. So that's just looking at a chronic disease. And some of the examples, you might be familiar with them: diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, asthma, arthritis, cancer. These are some examples of chronic disease. But when we look back at the question, it also speaks to incidence. And when you think about incidence, it really refers to the amount of or the number of new cases, right? So any one of these diseases, what is the case like? Are we seeing an increase in these cases? Do we have a lot of new cases? The next thing is the prevalence. The prevalence is the total number of cases of the disease within a population, and we're talking about the Caribbean over a certain period of time. Then finally, well, not finally, but one of the other terms that jumped out in the question is a precipitated lifestyle. And this refers to a way of living that is suddenly forced upon someone due to circumstances beyond their control. And in this case, the circumstances would have been a medical condition. Now, in terms of precipitated lifestyle, usually that is going to influence your exercise, your diet, main things. And then the word mortality. Mortality refers to death. So we're going to dive right into answering the question, and we can use one of those chronic diseases to provide us with an answer. And so before we even look at that, I want to indicate that this question is worth 7 marks. So that information that we mentioned would be forming a part of your question. You're answering the answer for the question. And so it would have brought in the framework, and then you dive into giving the example of which chronic disease you're going to be talking about. Now, the good thing about it as a student, if we look back on some of the examples, you would pick an example that you're more comfortable with. So it was not a question that is limiting you to any of these, but you can talk about a chronic illness that you're more comfortable with in terms of answering the question. So if you know about the disease, diabetes, if you know about hypertension, if you know about heart disease, choose the one that you're more familiar with in explaining, comfortable, so you can maximize on the marks for this particular question. So, unlike infectious diseases, traditionally prevalent in the Caribbean, chronic diseases are often linked to behavioral factors. And these factors include one, unhealthy diet. So when you're speaking about unhealthy diet, you're talking about the person, the individual consuming sugary food, drinks. They're eating more processed food. They are not consuming enough vegetables or fruits. It's not a part of their diet. They're not having what we would have considered as a balanced diet. And so that will contribute to the chronic diseases. Physical inactivity. Now, exercise will help to reduce chronic illness linked to diabetes, obesity, and even heart diseases. These taking the time out to do walks, um, morning jogging, not so walking, jogging, not necessarily strenuous exercise, but keeping active. Once you're inactive, your body is not doing what it is supposed to do to especially burn. If you eat fatty food and processed food, that will accumulate, and that is where we have the chronic illness increasing. And so your lifestyle, as we said, is very important. Tobacco use, so smoking, this can lead to diseases, cancer in terms of the lung. It can also lead to high blood pressure. It can also disrupt the context of how the body functions. And so chronic illness are linked to tobacco smoking. The excessive alcohol consumption, and we know alcohol may cause some amount of cancer as well, and it can lead to the destruction of your liver. And so you can have high blood pressure as well, linking to excessive alcohol consumption. So when you really look at these diseases, they are not something that you can catch from another individual. So it's not an infectious disease, but it's prevalent in the Caribbean because of our lifestyle. You have, and we're not going to be bashing them, but we have those fast food. When you think about Fridays, persons in Jamaica will want to link. Everybody line up. You ever see the KFC line on a Friday? It long from right there, so go way over there. So, and so we're consuming all this processed food, and because of that, we have an unhealthy diet. Most persons may be working, they can't find time, and so even as with age, we get so inactive that we allow ourselves to get these chronic illness. We see them showing up in persons of a particular age group because of our inactivity. So we can run about. Smoking is another one. We know that smoking is bad for our health, but persons may do it for various reasons, and it comes with its disadvantage. So it may lead to cancer, it can lead to other respiratory illnesses. And of course, we party. You know, Jamaicans, we party hard. The Caribbean, in Trinidad, we have our soca. We party and we consume alcohol. And one of the things that was evident, we say that it's slow. Chronic diseases are slow in how they impact our body. So it's not something that as you drink one cup of alcohol, you see the effect right away. Years on top of years, your lifestyle. And so all of that you'll be putting in to your structured answer in a paragraph form. Remember, we're aiming at getting that 7 marks. So we are going to be looking at type 2 diabetes using as our example. And so this is the most common form. It occurs when the body either doesn't produce enough insulin or becomes resistant to its effect. Now, if you're familiar with insulin, we know it's a hormone produced by the pancreas. And what it does, it helps with the regulation of the sugar levels in your blood. So with insulin, it maintains a certain status of glucose in your blood. When insulin is present, the glucose is absorbed and it is stored. It's stored as glycogen. And so what that does, if the person consumes, these, as we said, carbohydrated or sugary drinks that are high in carbohydrates or sugary drinks, they often have a lot of glucose level, and so it increases the sugar content, the glucose level in your blood. And so insulin is responsible for reducing that level of glucose by causing it to be stored in the liver in the form of glycogen. And if in case there's a low level, then it is released back into blood to maintain that. So what is the issue? One of the things, consuming a diet high in refined carbohydrates. And again, let's talk about the Jamaicans and the Trinidadians. One of the things that we do, we have these mixed drinks that we do. We mix in the boom with the Pepsi and the Coca-Cola and the alcohol. So all of that in our diet will all lead to an increase in the glucose in our body. And so if you're a person that is not producing enough insulin, if you have a condition where your body is now resistant to the effect that it would have to cause your body to convert it to glycogen and storing it, then you're going to have it leading to diabetes. Right? Physical inactivity, regular exercise helps manage the blood sugar levels, and a lack of it increases the risk of developing diabetes. So while we are consuming these drinks on a daily basis, if you're a person who is a working class or the person goes to work and they're an owner of a car and they drive, go home, they lie down in the bed, they sit at work, less inactivity, not going to a gym, not going to a walk or a run, right? this is what causes an increase in the blood sugar levels, because the inactivity, your metabolism is not basically being increased or high enough to maintain a certain level of glucose in your blood. Weight management is very important. When we think about diabetes, obesity is a significant risk factor for type 2 diabetes. So they're linking maintaining a healthy weight, and so you have to improve on your diet. You have to watch what you eat more whole grain, limit the consumption, as we said before, of those sugary drinks, um, processed food. And so exercise can significantly reduce the risk. Now, when you think about, we said that mortality, the impact it will have, definitely we're going to have a premature death. Many chronic diseases, which include diabetes, if it's not managed properly, can lead to complications and premature death if not treated or managed. This have implications, you normally talk about the social, which will affect our life in terms of our interaction with persons. Some of these chronic illness, they have to get persons to take care of them. Maybe some family member would have to stay at home to ensure that the person who is sick is taken care of. In terms of the government of the Caribbean, an increase in the prevalence of these chronic diseases, it put a strain on the healthcare resources. So what you find is that more money is being spent, which could be spent for other things, to basically treat these persons with the condition. And so this is going to be something ongoing, because these diseases sometimes are just with the individual and they're not normally necessarily a cure. And so the government has to be purchasing or spending money for medication and treatment of these individuals. Now, I hope you can look at one other of these chronic illness and write about it in terms of how it will affect the concept of the prevalence, the lifestyle, and you can get practice preparing for your exam. All right, so part B says Joseph contracts dengue fever and recovers. Well done, Joseph. I don't know if I wonder where's Mary in all of this. 3 months later, he goes to another town to take care of his grandmother who is suffering from dengue fever. Oh my gosh. Sorry about that, Grandma. He decides to take her to the hospital where both his blood and his grandmother's blood are tested. The antibody concentration of Joseph's blood is found to be abnormally high, even though he does not have any symptoms of the disease. Discuss why Joseph's immune response is heightened even though he does not appear ill. Let me tell you something. We go back to the first part. So we're going to deduce what is happening. Now, initially when Joseph contracted the disease, and if you're a Jamaican, we want to link it back to these mosquitoes. Dengue fever is caused by the Aedes aegypti mosquito. So what they will do, once they get the blood, the females want the blood so that they can use it to hatch their eggs. They're really just trying to survive, right? They want it's a part of their reproduction. So persons always bash the mosquitoes. When you go work, you're trying to fend for your family. And that the mosquito them are the female. So them go bite. But the thing is, when they bite an individual who has dengue, these organism, the pathogen gets into their saliva. And you know, one aspect of them, when they move on to another individual who doesn't have the disease, like Joseph, before he got the disease, what would have happened is that they would have introduced the pathogen in his bloodstream, and then they would cause the disease. You know, its symptoms include high fever, joint pain. Doctors may recommend paracetamol to deal with it, and over a period of 2 to 3 weeks, you should recover. So Joseph, when he was bitten by this infected mosquito, his body triggered an immune response where antibodies were created, and they were created to deal with the disease so that he would not be ill. So it tried to recover, but it's the first time he's experienced the disease. So due to the increase in the antibodies, they will go around, because you know the antibodies like the soldier, so they go around and find the virus, and what they will do is to neutralize it. So they neutralize it, make it ineffective, but it takes a time to do that. So while the body is doing that, you have those increased joint pains, we still have the high fever and things like that. And so Joseph over time will get better. But watch me now. Joseph has gone to assist his grandmother. Now the thing about our immune system, it come like this. You must say, you know, say, fees so that disease can appear back, you know. So let us wall off and make the antibody go and roll out in our blood. So the blood will continue to have these antibodies around. Now, the thing about dengue is that I think you might have about 4 different strains. So it might, after I'm finished, I'm going to explain, you might not be able to catch it, that strain of the virus again. But if you have one of the other 3, if you're exposed to one of the other 3, then you might show symptoms. So jumping back. So Joseph now go around, guarded town, link him grandmother. His grandmother is feeling ill because she has the virus. She has the dengue fever now. So why is it that when they tested both their blood, there would be an increased concentration in Joseph's blood? Now, at some point while he's at his grandmother, possibly the virus, he got bitten by a mosquito that was transmitting the disease again. But what happened? We made mention about the fact that in the bloodstream, the antibodies would be remaining. And when he got the disease initially, we have those memory cells, these T cells. So these cells are going to come so and say, all right, oh, the virus that deal with the body wicked, you know, let's memorize this, because if it comes out again, we'll be ready. So it so happened that while taking care of his grandmother, he might have gotten bitten by an infected mosquito, and so quickly his immune system dived into action. So they saw the introduction of this virus in his bloodstream, and quickly the T cells were, oh, me remember you from them time there. You did make my body feel that all sort of pain. Me can't make this happen again. So the T cells quickly started to rapidly produce the antibodies that will now neutralize. So at the end of the day, Joseph would not show any form of symptom, but the virus, he may have come into contact with the virus again, and so his body would have had that immune response. Now, as I said before, you might have about 3 to 4 different strains. So while Joseph would have gotten the antibodies in his blood exposed to that, this antibody may not work for the other three. And so if it was a different strain that was presented in this town, then he might have come down with symptoms and it would have seemed like he would have caught the disease again, but it would have been a different strain. So Joseph, big up yourself. Not everybody would have gone this route to help their grandmother. Wonderful. And so now we would have gotten the explanation as to what happens in our body in terms of a disease. So it really triggers what we call a lifelong immune response. And so once the body gets exposed to this virus again, then all of that will be triggered and the individual will not see, you might have some symptoms, but it may not be full force like the initial scenario when the individual caught the disease. So that is the end of question 6. I hope this solution was beneficial. Do like, do subscribe, do share our content. You can comment which paper, which question you want us to do. Buckle down tutoring service. Thank you for watching.